The War Back Home, the story of Raymond Frantz. At any given time, you could talk to a war veteran and hear stories about the time they served and events that happened while they were at war. This is not the case when speaking to Raymond Frantz, Spec 5 in the United States Army. Not all soldiers that were drafted were sent to active war. This is the case for Raymond Frantz. He was the last living male in his family and could not be sent to active duty in the war. Raymond Carl Frantz was born on September 24, 1946 in Mount Etna, Pennsylvania, to Carl Washington Frantz and Catherine Mary White Frantz. He was the middle child of three, having an older sister Faye and a younger sister Sharon. Raymond attended Eastern Lebanon County High School and worked at Karen Spink Company. He was drafted into the Army right after graduating high school. When asked about how he felt being drafted, Raymond stated, "I wasn't happy, but when you are drafted, you have no choice. You have to go." Can you tell me how you felt when you found out you were drafted?
I wasn't happy, but when you're drafted, you have no choice. You have to go.
Frantz packed his things, leaving behind his parents and his sisters, and went to Camp AP Hill for his point of entry. This was where all testing was completed for soldiers were shipped out and to their basic training. Upon getting to his point of entry, the first person that Frantz met was a classmate, Johnny Hoover. From his port of entry, Frantz was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training. Here, Frantz learned how to shoot a rifle, throw a grenade, learned basic first aid, and participated in mile runs. After completing basic training, he was sent to Fort Sam Houston for medical school for training to become an Army medic. Medic training included learning how to give injections, put on tourniquets, how to donate blood, and how to treat wounds and bandage them. Frantz did not specialize in anything else other than being a medic. When asked about his most vivid memory, Frantz stated, "What was your most vivid memory of training or in school?"
My most vivid memories was when we got sent to AP Hill, which is about 70 miles southwest of Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where it's stationed. That's my last station. And we had to go down into the boonies and give support to the 91st Engineers, which were on training maneuvers to train ROTC, OCS candidates, on fire and movement and all kinds of escape and evade maneuvers. They'd send them out into the woods in the dark, and then they had to find their way back, and the 91st Engineers would be the enemy, and they'd go out and hunt them down. And if they caught any, they were brought to a makeshift POW camp, and then they were treated like POWs. They'd try and get information out of them, more, other than their name, rank, and serial number. They'd put wires in their shoes and had a crank telephone, and they'd shock them. They'd throw them in a water pit with snakes they caught that they killed and had thin wire hooked to them so that it looked like they were moving after them. And they put them in lockers and bang on the lockers. And we also got some Vietnamese soldiers that they brought over, and they also trained them in escape and evade maneuvers. And we had a couple of them that tried to crawl over the barbed wire fence, and they'd get pulled back down. And when that had happened, some would get caught in the barbed wire and get cut, and then I'd have to treat them.
When talking to Raymond, he said that the best experience was being able to take care of people, and the worst part of his experience at AP Hill was almost being shot by a recruit. What was the best part and the worst part of that?
The best part and the worst part, the best part was taking care of people and stuff. The worst part was when I almost got shot by a recruit. He shot at a target and the bullet ricocheted and went in between my face and the officer's face that we were doing fire and movement, where one side runs down and then kneels down and shoots at targets, and then the other group moves down. Well, this guy moved down, and as he was moving down, he shot at a target that didn't fall down, and the bullet ricocheted and went between our faces. It would have been a little over or a little one way or the other. One of us would have got hit in the head.
When describing instructors that stood out to him, Frantz remembered two. In basic training, his instructor was Sergeant Walker. Frantz described him as a little guy but thought he was very strict, but kept all his soldiers straight with what they were doing. He also remembered an instructor from his time in South Carolina. He couldn't remember his name, but remembered that he used to play the guitar and they would all sit in a group and sing songs that he would play. He enjoyed this time because it was a break from all the work they were doing. Frantz had many memorable moments from his training service. The hardest part of his training was his medical training. It was difficult to learn because of putting in IV injections. The medics had to practice on each other. He also disliked the PT test during basic training. He didn't like being out in the rain or snow. He remembered having to sleep with a tent with rain leaking inside. He had to cover up with his poncho so his sleeping bag would stay dry. His ambulance was stolen by a soldier trying to get back home one time. It ended up running out of gas and the MPs caught the soldier who stole it. He remembered that during the winter, other soldiers would siphon fuel out of his heater in his tent so they could keep their heaters on high. But he would end up running out of fuel and he would have to sleep in the cold. He remembered a time when his ambulance got stuck in the mud and he had gathered brush and sticks to get it out of the mud. He also spoke about a time the axle on his ambulance broke and he had to fix it with a coat hanger. He had difficulty getting back to base. He ended up having to drive down a steep hill into the woods that brought him out on a highway to take him back to his base. Frantz recalled making many friends during his service time, but he didn't keep in contact with any of them after his service ended. One of the things he enjoyed in his time was making all the new friends from other states. He also enjoyed going to the PX or to the bars during his time off. He didn't drink, though, because he was always the designated driver, responsible for getting all the others that get drunk back to the base. Frantz's service ended in January 1968 while he was stationed in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. He had bought a car while he was stationed there, and when his service ended, he packed his things up and drove home. His family was not expecting him to return home, but were excited and greeted him with hugs and kisses. After his service, he took a month off to readjust to normal life. He had a hard time adjusting to not getting up at 2 or 3 in the morning for maneuvers. After a month break, he got a job at a shoe factory. He worked for a couple of months until he found a job at a textile factory in Reading, where he worked for the next 32 years. Frantz stated, "The military changed him for the better. He was a wild child before entering the military. After his service, he had learned to be more down to earth. He learned to respect others' manners and to do what he was told and not complain about it. He also learned to control his temper and not stay angry at people, but to give forgiveness."
How did the service change you?
How does the service change me? Well, it changed me from being a little on the wild side to being more down to earth, you know. Respecting people and, you know, which I didn't do when I was younger, didn't respect people, but it taught me manners and stuff, and, you know, obey instructions and orders from your family. You know, they ask you to do something, you do it, and not bellyache about it, you know, that kind of stuff, like I used to do when I was a kid.
Frantz believes that everyone should have to serve at least 2 years in the military. He believes this helps people learn the aspects of our government and what we fight for. He doesn't like wars, but thinks sometimes they are a necessity. The message Frantz would like to give to future generations is to stop downplaying the servicemen. They would fight for our rights and freedom. If we did not fight for these wars overseas, we would end up fighting them on our own land. And people would lose their families, they would lose everything. You shouldn't judge or disrespect our service members like they did when they came home from Vietnam. Raymond Frantz may have stayed in the United States during the Vietnam War, but he helped to train the soldiers that were sent to active combat. He cared for them while they completed their training. He learned many life lessons during his service time. He has strong belief in our military and believes all veterans and military personnel deserve respect. They have earned it.